All right, gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. How you boys doing?
Good to see you, man.
Good.
Good to see you
Thanks.
too, Floyd.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, guys.
Well, I know we're here with Jesse and Biggs, aka Floyd Ense, another community citizen of MChigeeng, and former. Actually, I guess you were a former student of mine way back in the day.
Yep. Yeah.
What grade?
Geez, I don't know if I was a principal then or just your teacher.
I think you and Diane were coming in. I think Diane was phys ed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you.
I think
it was in the rotation when we did 6, 7, 8 rotations.
Right. So I was teaching math, science, and physics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know, like you guys are busy, right? And I appreciate you coming in a little bit early to the studio to do this podcast. Some of us have things to do tonight, like watch our teams, our NHL teams, in the playoffs. How's your teams doing? Like you're a Red Wings fan.
How did I know this was going to come up right off the bat?
And the Sens, how are they doing?
Saw Brady Kachuk at the RBC Open.
Oh yeah, that's right. They're golfing. So
That's a good sport in itself, though. Right?
well, let's talk a little bit about that. Now, you guys are avid golfers. I'm an avid. I try to swing a golf club. I wouldn't say I'm avid anymore. I've given up on the dream. But you guys still hit the links quite often.
Yes. Men's nights, absolutely.
I try to. I feel like it's gone down to about the same thing, just like men's nights. I used to go all the time.
I peaked in
go
high
by
school.
myself.
Yeah. Well, weren't you on the NASA championship team?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, dragged us down. We could have been to the OFSA championship team if I wasn't on the team, I'm sure.
But you guys aren't scratch golfers. But I mean, you're still pretty good golfers.
Oh yeah, play a lot of tournaments.
Yeah.
Men's Open, Gore Bay.
And you recently part of PGA course with your dad in Vegas.
Oh yeah, in Vegas. Yeah. There's 4 of us, mind you, on the course scrambling, but
Yeah, well, I mean, it counts, right? Now, in terms of golf, what's your score? What's your 18 score?
Oh man, recently it's bad. I don't even want to talk about that right now.
Like 80?
No, I've been having a hard time breaking 80 like the last couple of years. It just
Yeah.
so I'm probably like mid to high 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now.
Well, if I could do that, that'd be a good day for me,
Yeah.
right?
I'm thrilled to break 90.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's a lot like archery. It's like you got to remember you're trying to do the same thing over and over again, right? You're just trying to get that swing down pat and not make 1,000,001 adjustments, trying to adjust your slice. Just try and do it right and do it over and over again. And it's a definition of insanity for me.
To the point where you're not thinking about it anymore, right? Because as soon as you bring the thought process into there is when you get those things that go awry.
Favorite course on Manitoulin? What is it?
Oh,
The Ridge. It's got to be the Ridge. I mean, Rainbow Ridge. It's only 18-hole golf course,
Right.
But the other two are meticulously maintained. Like they are really nice. The only thing is like trying to get on them right on a consistent basis would be difficult.
Yeah, I find if you had to break it down in terms of challenge, of fairways, and of greens, how would you rate the courses?
Challenge, I would say the Ridge.
Yeah, especially now that they did they let a lot of areas grow in, right? So the grass is like much longer where it's supposed to be.
Like the fescue is on the sides.
thick.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
It's thick.
it gives you kind of like that European feel, right?
Yeah.
Like the golf courses.
And there's way more bunkers to play, and I just like those challenges where, like Mindamoy, the Brookwood Bray, would be my favorite golf course on the island, and one of the most well-maintained greens, I would say, and fairways on the island. Just not a whole lot of challenges for you other than that water on 6.
Yeah.
Everything's pretty straightforward. Now that they've pushed back that par 4 on number 7, that to play it like an actual par 4, that has added a stroke to everybody's game because everybody's driving that before.
Yeah.
So with that, a little bit of challenge.
And that big water hazard in front of the, like, you know what I mean? If you could lay up in front of the hill in the pass, I mean, that's a great shot, right? You're gonna birdie that hole. But now you can't put it there because it's all water.
Yeah.
Right? And you're also driving from way back.
And then I would give Gore Bay the tournament favorites. Like in terms of like who can host a good tournament, Gore Bay hosts a good tournament.
Yeah, you've got some gourmet. Well, maybe we won't even get into your chicken suit outfit or whatever, and the police that came to the. Yeah, that we'll keep that for another podcast. What about you, Biggs? What would you say in terms of challenge, in those areas on Manitoulin courses?
So like I'm probably in the same boat. Like I like a challenge, and I like there to be a well-rounded challenge. So for me, I think that would kind of go to Manitoulin, just because, like, especially since they started to really grow the things in for fescue, they have the bunkers in play, they have the large greens with undulation on them. I think those all come into play. They have a lot of out of bounds. They have well placed hazards. They make you think about shots, right?
Right.
Especially when you get a little bit longer in your game, they make you think about those shots. And like Jesse said, Minimo is starting to get to that point where you can't just hammer at it anymore, right? Because they're putting these well-placed hazards there and making you think about your shots. And that's when mistakes happen, as we just talked about, right?
Yeah.
Like when a golf course makes you think is when they've got you, right?
Well,
if you can't do muscle memory stuff, they got you, right?
Well, like if you take number 6 on Mindy, right, and I don't know what that elevation drop is, 100 feet maybe, like from where you're teeing off, that's high.
Yeah, it is.
Right, where you're going down. I mean, if you try and bring it around, or you're trying to go over, like that's a tough shot, right? You know what I mean? That's a good challenge.
Yeah, playing that solo, like if you have to play your own ball, that's tough.
Heck yeah.
I've only ever been there recently when it's
A scramble.
Yeah, scramble. So
Yeah.
everyone's ripping at it.
I find Mindy, I mean, for my monster slice, right? Like it's just so forgiving, and every hole that I need a slice, it works for me, right? But as soon as I have to tighten that up, I mean, I'm taking way more off my swing, which is why I kind of like Gorbet for that. It's a little bit tighter, you know, in certain instances where you do have to think a little bit more than Mindy, and then but it's not an 18-hole golf course, right? So you've got a better atmosphere in terms of like there's a bigger club house, you know, that type of thing in Manitoulin at Rainbow Ridge. So it's a definite toss up for me. But
when's the last time you went golfing alone?
Alone, that's a tough one.
I know the answer is like 30 years for you.
No. I walked the course probably 10 years ago.
Like to go out and golf a full 18 holes?
9 or 18.
So like I often
yourself?
went out like after Junior went to bed or something like that, right? Like my toddler, after he went to bed, I'd go out there and just like chip around and stuff like that. But that doesn't really constitute. Or I do, like my house is on the golf course, so I'd go and play 8, 9, 1, back down 7, and walk home, right? So I did that often, and that was nice. But I never took a full set. Usually took 3 balls, so that way when I was done, right?
Yeah.
Kind of limit my
Your losses.
my losses exactly. Yeah, so that was nice. Even going out there with him a couple times, even though he didn't really golf, but yeah. But to play a full 9 or 18, I don't know when the last time.
Yeah, me neither, man. I mean, you just get so sucked into. Well, see, the thing is for me that in the summertime, here there's just a million and frickin' one things to do.
Oh God, yeah.
Right, like, and for us with the cottages and fishing charters and, you know, wakeboarding or paddleboard fishing or fishing for fun, you know what I mean? Like trying to schedule Wednesday nights in plus beach volleyball and whatever. Yeah. Trying to make men's night on Wednesdays is hard enough, right? I guess it's a good problem to have. Right. But it is. It's tough because this is the Mecca, right? I mean, if you came here for a golf vacation, and that's what you came here to do in the summertime, man, you could have a blast. You could do each course, right? 1 per day, double it up, have a day of rest, right? You do an 18 everywhere on 3 different courses twice. It'd be a good little trip.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. It's a destination for golf as well. And plus the vistas are awesome, right? Yeah. And relatively, like it's not that busy. You can come and golf in the morning and most mornings, unless there's an event, right? You're getting away pretty fairly. I mean, I never call for a tea time. I mean, in Manitoulin you do.
You book it online. But they're usually pretty flexible over there too.
Yeah.
Show up. Yeah. So, you know, for anybody that's looking at coming to Manitoulin for a little bit of golf action, it's definitely a place to go. And it's relatively cheap too. It's not, you're not breaking the bank, right?
Well, the reason I asked about the solo golf is just the therapeutic element I find when you're golfing alone. Like, it's one thing to golf with your buddies and like kind of have the social element to it, but I find like golfing alone is such a different experience than golfing with your friends. Not only do I shoot better when I'm golfing alone, but I feel like the peace that you have just kind of being with your own thoughts and then getting that exercise in too. I don't know. It just does something. It's something I really appreciate a little bit more and more the older I get. And I'm just curious if you guys ever like go out and do that.
See, we used to do it lots. Actually, it's interesting you say that because I ended up when we were first starting motocross racing, I ended up hurting myself real bad in a practice, right? Tore some ligaments and like I actually bruised my lung. At the same time, I broke some bones in my neck. Like it was just a horrible experience. And it happened early in June. And by the time, and I was laid up for a long time. So I used golf as a form of therapy in the month of August, right? And I did exactly what you did. I went out with just a 9-iron, right? And I walked with some golf balls in my pocket. And I was just, you know what I mean? Just practicing a swing because everything in here was all like, I was just, pulled and strained in there. And I did that often, walking the course, one for exercise, two, the serenity of going early in the morning. And you know when it's really hot and everything's so clear, you can see those bugs kind of going by, drifting by, almost like snowflakes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to that for sure. But I haven't done that for a long time. No.
Yeah.
You?
Yeah, no, I see what you're talking about there, Jesse, where it's just get out there and it's just a whole different mindset, right? Like it's just like being on land, right?
Yeah.
Very similar, right? The only thing is like you question yourself as to, do I do my foot wedge now that no one's here? Right?
Yeah.
He doesn't care. No, but it is, and golf is good for that, right? It really challenges your thinking, the way you normally play, right? Different things like that. Like just like you said, the majesty of everything and the way the dew's dropping in the morning and lifting off the grass, right? It's serene. I could just picture it now. You look back and see your footsteps on the green.
Yeah.
And then you think after, you're like, oh man, that whoever's walking up behind the green is going to see that I 3-putted all across the green there. They're going to see my footprints all over the green, right? Well, no, it is very nice. And it's, when you say that, like a lot of things come back and yeah, I definitely miss it. But I wouldn't change where I am right now.
Well, speaking of that, you went, you were a former student here in MChigeeng, and you went to MSS. You both did. What happened after? Where did you go to post-sec?
Oh man. So I dabbled around with some other things. I struggled in school. I really had a hard time kind of understanding how it all worked, how to embrace that different mindset, right, of being on your own. Really struggled with that. And I finally found something when I went to University of Western, and I went into the Bachelor of Health Sciences, and I thought, like, you know what, this is where I can see myself working somewhere in the health field, right? So I did that. I'd spent some time in there. I started talking to some other people, and they're like, you know what, like nursing really opens up a lot of doors for you, right? And at the time, a close friend of mine, Leah, she's a nurse as well. My sister's a nurse. There's a lot of nurses close to me, and I was like, you know what, like there's a lot of opportunities in nursing, right? So I was like, oh, okay, like maybe I'll shift over to that. So I switched my role and I transferred into nursing. Spent some time there. The weird thing was I was doing really well, and I don't know, like it's weird how this happens, but I was finally kind of catching my stride, right, in school, and that's something, like I said, I struggled with. I was finally catching my stride, and I was doing things. I was playing hockey on the side, golfing on the side, doing all this stuff. I ended up injuring my knee, right, to the point where I like completely blew it out, right, MCL, ACL damage, meniscus damage. I couldn't do clinical, right? And with nursing, a lot of things were co-requisites, like you had to take them at the same time as your practicum. So then I just said, you know what, it's not even worth it for me to stay up here and do one course. I said, it makes no sense. So I ended up just withdrawing, coming home. My dad ended up getting sick, and Roger, who was in my position at the time, reached out to me and said, hey, I know you're home. You used to be a drug strategy coordinator here. Why don't you come try this on for a bit, right? And it was a mental health clinician, or it wasn't really a clinician. It was what was it at the time? Alternatives program.
Right, alternatives. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, sure, I'll try it out. So I kind of went into that role, and not knowing much, not being very comfortable in it, was saying, you know what, let's give it a try. I sat with people, and that's kind of like where a lot of my, like, I actually fell out of love with nursing and medicine at that point. And I kind of started to see the amount of pain in our community members, right? And where that pain is coming from, right? But there was something, like, I did these different trainings and stuff like that, and I was always missing something, right? And I went through a couple supervisors, and Tammy Gordon was one of my last supervisors there. And I talked to her about that. I said, you know what, there's something I'm missing here, right? Like, I talk to people, and I talk to them about their issues. I talk to them about their traumas, and they can rhyme them off.
Yeah.
I said, but there's a big piece that's missing here, because we're not getting anywhere, right? I'm not seeing anything different. We talk about the same thing the next time, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And they talk about the same issues that they fall into in the next week, right? And the thinking didn't really change, and nothing really changed, right, in terms of what they were able to do in those moments of stress, right, or pressure. So then we talked about that over and over again. And Tammy's like, hey, why don't you check this thing out? I said, okay. And the goal was for us both to go and do it, because it was EFT, emotion focused therapy. And she's like, we should go check this out. And she said, like, I heard that there's 2 strains of it. And she said, we should really go for, like, the Sue Johnson side of it, because I heard really good things about it. Me, someone that really struggles with schooling and being able to sit down and read, I was like, yeah, okay, like, I'll go check it out, because it was in person. It was a classroom discussion where they engage kind of like one-on-one with you, right? And that's where I can keep my attention, and I can learn a lot from those. So I said, sure, I'll go try it out. I went up there, and I was sitting, like, picture like a standard classroom, but with bigger tables, right? You can fit probably about 3 people at a table, and there's 4 rows back on each side, and there's like a little walkway in the middle. They decided to do introductions on that side. I'm sitting front row this side.
So you're last?
I'm last, right? And they're going around the room, right? Saying who I am, and everyone there, that, like, I love them to death, but everyone there, they introduce themselves based on their training, right? And their scholarly accolades, right? So there's these people with, like, letters longer than their name after, and I'm like, oh god,
every
like,
qualification.
Oh god, like, am I gonna, like, come up last year and say, like, I'm not even finished my nursing degree yet, right? Like, that's what was going through my head as I was listening to all these people with all of their accolades. I'm like, oh god, and I just got more nervous. And then it came to me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm here. I'm just kind of like a helper, and I've noticed these different things in my community. I just want to learn this, and yeah. And I told him, I said, I'm working on my nursing degree. I said, I kind of gave him a little more background information as to why I should be here, right?
Trying to salvage it.
Yeah. Like, so I was doing a little bit of, I was doing clinical work, right? But I wasn't by any means comfortable in it. So I had a discussion with Tammy after I sat through the thing. I really made my, like, I don't know, like, I think that was enough pressure for me to be like, focus on this now, right? Like, focus on what's in front of you. Because if I focus on what was going on there for me, like, I just wouldn't be able to do it, right? So I focused on the material so hard, right? Like, so hard. And I remember, and even the person that trained me remembers me doing these notes, right? And how I'm going to bring this into our community. How am I going to bring this into, like, how am I going to put an Indigenous lens on this stuff, right? Like, how do we make it so that it's easily comprehensible for our people, right? I remember doing that, like, doing these different drawings and different things like that, doodling. But yeah, I remember that being like a pretty big thing. And since then, EFT has kind of been like something that I'm really passionate about, right? Like it's something I really see as something that can be really beneficial for our community. But that's kind of where I'm at right now in terms of my training.
So give me go into a little bit of detail on EFT. Like, what is EFT a little bit more in detail? Like if you could describe what that mechanism is like.
Yeah. So what it is, it's an attachment focused modality. It's a psychotherapy modality that's attachment focused, and there's things inside of EFT where it could be couples, it could be a family, it could be individual, and what it is that you get a therapeutic level of emotion going, right, in order to help the person understand what's going on with them, right, and help them make sense of what's going on. And you can do that between a couple, right, an individual, or in a family setting, right? And that helps to build, and all the languages around attachment, right? How we see ourselves connecting to one another, right? And the way that I've recently seen how to make people see that this is part of what we need as Indigenous people is going back to that connection, right? If we were to take a look at all of the stuff that we did, our ancestors did, right? And we take a look at the language, right? The Anishinaabe, if we take a look at it and break it down, how did they know what's animate, what's inanimate? How did they know that things have spirit in them, right? How did they know that a fire has a spirit? How did they know all of these different things that we still don't even fully understand today, right? And my answer to that is connection, right? They have to be so connected to everything, listening to everything, listening to the way the winds are going to tell you where the animals are going to be, right? Listening to everything. Everything has and is telling us something, right? But in this day and age, what's the only thing that we're connected to? Exactly, right? Exactly. And when was the last time when we're so connected to something like this that we've had a true gut feeling about something, right? That's when we need to start getting back to that connection to self first. And I think EFT is actually the beginning foundation for us to start connecting to ourselves first before we can start doing any other work, right? I don't think it's going to be like be all end all. It's not going to be like, boom, here you go, right? Mm-hmm. But it's going to be an opportunity for us to understand what's been going on inside of us that's been trying to teach us what we're going through and trying to show us that it's okay, right? A lot of times we don't have that opportunity to sit and do that, right? I've worked with people who are like later on in life, right? Like 6 years old, and they're like, when we get down to that emotional part, they're like, I said, when was the last time you had to do this? Yeah. When do you ever remember doing this? I don't. I've never had that opportunity to do this, right? And it just goes to show you how much trauma and how much pain our people are carrying to not be able to sit with emotion for a little bit, right? So,
well, I think, you know, when you overlay the effect of residential school, or the 60s scoop, or, you know, all of those major trauma points in our parents or grandparents or great grandparents' lives that still have an impact, you know, even on us. Like if you take through, you know, the three of us, and I'm 52 and you're, I don't know, 30 something or 40 something, I don't know how old you're 30 or 20 something, right? Every one of us, like each one of us is directly impacted by one of those effects and we're only removed one person, mm-hmm. right? In terms of our parent or our grandparent, mm-hmm. right? But by that serious trauma. And I know when we first started, when I was laying out the foundation of the show, and you know, we were fooling around with what would have been used for social media back then, but you're just kind of dabbling in it in terms of video production. And one of the things that I wrote, and I really liked it, was, you know, in order to reconnect, you have to disconnect, right? And I meant exactly that. I meant taking, you know, time, whether it's, you know, whatever you can manage, right? And put this away whether it's for 5 minutes, a half an hour, a day, a week, right? And it's freaking hard, right? Especially when we're, I think of that today when you guys walked in and I'm downstairs, right? And whatever. And I'm still like connected at the hip to this thing and trying to get shit done in the day before the day ends, right? And I'm talking to somebody who, one of my contractors who, he's dealing like some serious shit, right? And yeah, there we are talking about that and having a conversation about that before we get into the nitty gritty of the business at hand, right? And it's important to really take stock of that. And I know it's a huge issue in education right now. Like it is, well, it's not even just in education, it's globally, right? If you think of the ban on TikTok, the US is going to impose, right? Or the ban on TikTok of federal employees or whatever, that connectedness piece to technology is going to be challenged. And in schools, it's causing a monumental increase that we've never seen before in mental health issues for kids, right? Like we're talking a 4-fold jump in 13 to 18-year-old girls, right? From 12% to up over 40% in terms of a major psychiatric episode or a major mental health episode in more than 40% of that age group in the States. That's almost and major meaning not like I'm having like, a breakdown because I'm sad. I mean, like we're talking major where it's a depressive episode, right? Which is when you see somebody in a depressive episode, it's different than someone sulking in their room. It means like shit is happening that you don't know how to solve as a parent, right? And they're attributing that to just the inundation of kids' attachment to technology and not being disconnected to be alone with their thought or be alone with their emotion for any amount of time.
And there's another piece to that too, right? If you look at any of the information or any of the stuff that's being portrayed in social media, like how long are clips on TikTok?
8 seconds, I think you have.
There you go. So you're getting these instantaneous hits of like dopamine on a regular basis.
Regular.
You look at games, right? They're not like games like we used to play, right? Like I watched a kid play a game there one time and he's going around like hacking down a tree and he gets like his reward, right? He gets like, I think he gets lumber or something. He goes and knocks down like a rock and he gets like bricks, right? Like everything he's doing in that automatic reward, right?
Feed me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how are we expecting our kids to go out there in life and be rewarded by doing homework, being rewarded by having a conversation with someone, being rewarded by seeing results in something that we can't even comprehend yet, right? Yeah. In a diploma, right? Or something like that, that they can't even think about
or a relationship.
yet.
Yeah.
Or a relationship, right? Like any of these things that we would normally get dopamine from, how are we expecting the kids to be able to thrive in that kind of situation, in that kind of society, right? Because it's society in general that this disconnect and the disconnection is growing at a quicker pace, right? The more things you look at, the further the disconnect's going to be, right? Yeah. And that's why like when I see things, it's bringing that connection back, right? And that connection to self, including that, right? Because when we get overwhelmed by these different situations, right, we are going to be able to handle that in a good way, right? Yeah. We know that we don't have to go to substances. We don't have to go to food. We don't have to go to all these negative coping behaviors, right?
I had an interesting, today at the end of the day, I got this young guy from the West End. that he's gonna redo one of my docks, and he's like, oh, I can get some lumber, but I don't have a truck, so we have to go get it. And so he's like, we can get a pretty good deal at the Amish guys. They're cutting now, and we can get all that cedar there. So I'm like, I don't know where it is. He's like, well, drive me home and I'll. So we chatted on the way out there. So we get into this Amish lumber yard, and they're, it's 5 o'clock or whatever, and they're still cutting, and we had this conversation because this kid is like absolutely university material. He's smart as a whip, and he's like, man, I just, we're talking about what's on the agenda, what's in store, and he's like, man, I just want to. I don't know if I want to go to university. I don't know if and he's getting so much pressure from everybody and from the system that says to us, they said it to us three, right? You should go to university. You should go to university. Same thing to me. Like and it just streamlines kids to be a certain way, right? To go to university and because that's going to get you a certificate, and you're going to get a job, and you're going to have a good life and get a mortgage and get a family and get a, right? It's just this mindset of how it's supposed to be. So we were chatting about this, and we pull in there, and there's these two kids, and I recognize the tall one, right? And they got this big ass load of slabs and 2 horses pulling this thing, and dad and mom are on that mill, and they're, you know what I mean? The mill's, there's dust everywhere and whatever. And the young kid I was with, well, when I get off and I see these guys and they come over and they're like, the one guy's, hey, you catching any fish? And I'm like, where the hell do I know this kid from? Meanwhile, I had taken him out and his dad and his little brother on a fishing charter like a year ago, and they actually did catch fish. I didn't recognize them because they're covered in sawdust and whatever. Anyway, that part was funny. But when we left, right, this young guy that I was with, he's like, why isn't that a part of school? Why aren't we going to see? Because what would that be like, right? Where you're just, that's what you're doing today. You're cutting 2x8s and you're feeding the horses, and you're not connected, and you don't know what's going on in every facet of society, and being inundated with all of this information. What if you just focused on that? And he's like, why don't we go there? Why don't we go and as a part of school, right? And just observe and interact and maybe even do some of that, right? To get our hands dirty and see what it's like to be disconnected, right? I thought it was an interesting observation on his part. Instead of, man, how the hell could they do that? Right? Like, why would they? I wonder what that's like, right? For us, right? Especially for me, because I'm way older than you guys. I mean, I know what it's like to not have something to do, right? Like I know as a kid, right? Where you're like, oh, what should we do today? Right? Kind of thing. And getting kicked out of the house, right? And being told not to come back, like till dark. Like, don't come inside, stay out of here. Right? And we don't have that right now. We have a constant babysitter, which is a dopamine injector, right? That I think is really worthy of some serious intervention, but I have no idea what that is, because you're not taking it away.
Well, like you said, we can, but the thing is, once we take that away from the kids, right, you got to remember that our parents are doing the same thing too, right? And when these behaviors or these emotions pop up, that also the parents don't know how to handle, right? Or struggle handling, right? Every single behavior is learned, right? So if we didn't learn these ways of coping, right, what are we going to do when the withdrawal symptoms start popping up for this dopamine injector that you're talking about, right? So it's just, we need to understand that, this is going to happen, right? Your kid is going to go through withdrawal from lack of TV, right? Lack of connection, right?
Yeah. Connected to the internet.
Yeah.
And you can't prohibit it either, because the world is way different now than it was, and the connectivity of everything moving, it's almost considered abusive to disconnect your kid from that world.
I agree, and I in terms of that that research that was saying that 40% jump, they did a bunch of interviews with kids, and they're like, what would you do? Would you oppose TikTok being banned at school? And their first question was, for me or for everybody? And they're like, for everybody. I would support it. Mm. As long as it wasn't a separator of being excluded from the group, right? So taking it away, because kids are like, as long as I don't feel left out, right? And I'm not, and no one is allowed to have it, right? And I'm not being ostracized as a part of my social group, right? And there's a way to feel that I still belong to that group, because and they're like, yeah, 100%. I'd prefer that. It's just that if I'm not on it and everybody else is, then what am I missing out? And am I being whatever?
That's just it. I remember growing up in the MSN days before Facebook, and it was like you were left out if you weren't on MSN at 5 o'clock after school. Like you were online every night, and if you weren't, you were missing out on the conversation and the chit chat that was going to happen in the classroom the next day.
Yeah, and I think, when kids are saying that, I was actually surprised by the majority of the kids that were saying 100%. If we're all not on it, yeah, I'm all for that, right? Which then gets you thinking about some of these strategies for school, right? These phone-free schools. It's coming back. Like people, they're doing it because of how much shit it causes at school, right? Yeah, in terms of, dude, everything with AI generating, inappropriate stuff on other people's pictures, right? That when you do it is kid porn. People don't understand. Kids don't understand this. You put this on a minor's face, right? And that's it. You are distributing child porn, and that is a freaking monstrous claim that these kids just didn't think. Yeah. Right. And so, those types of vulnerabilities of kids of not knowing that, and also then being, I don't know if the word is sheltered or whatever that would be, right? I guess it is a form of censorship, and then that's a whole nother question, right? Should that be imposed on kids if they're too young to make the decision to do this themselves, right? I don't know. I mean, I know that research is showing, parental research, is the longer you can prevent your child from having access to a phone, the better. Every parent is saying this. Every parent guru or parenting guru is saying this. Don't give them that phone. Do not. And I know, right? I can remember that conversation with us because, with my daughters, it was your grade 8, right? And everybody has one, right? And you're just trying to hold them off. Mm-hmm. And then of course they start babysitting for other people. Then you're like, God damn it. I want to have that access, right? To have them, be able to get a hold of me very quickly if something happens. So it's geez, when is that thing? But now that's backed up to freaking grade 4, grade 5.
Oh yeah, kids.
Right? They're 8 years old.
We start off with your own iPad to play your games when you're a kid.
Yeah. It's kind of scary in a lot of regards. I don't mean to sound like an old fart, but I mean, I think it's something that is worth conversation at the very least, because that disconnection that we have from our surroundings and from the real world and from nature and from each other, right, also builds that shell of disconnection to self.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And at what point, like you said, when is it up to us as leaders or adults in the group to say, why is it a bad thing to censor some stuff to enhance the development of children, right? Anything that we realize isn't beneficial to our children, right? We say, you know what, let's prolong this a little bit. Let's wait till they're 18 before they can have some alcohol. Is it 19? 18?
18 some places, 19.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and gambling, these different things like that, right? Like, let's slow this down, right? Because all these things like have these effects on the brain, right? That we know about, smoking, all these other things. But now we're finding that, you know what, this instantaneous reward system, such as this high intensity gaming, right? Or these short clips on
TikTok or
TikTok,
Instagram.
yeah, social media stuff, right? Like, these all have the same effect, right? At what point are we like, you know what, this makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah. And we're rewiring. I mean, I think when you start to look at the physiological effects of, or development of 0 to 10, right? When you have this exponential increase in neural development for children, once in utero, and then again as kids, and then it only happens one more time, right? You've got that little lull from 10 to puberty, and then it goes into overdrive again, and those high risk behaviors and all of that hardwiring of brains happens to kids and to teenagers, right? It physiologically has a big impact on how they're hardwired for those that want for immediate gratification, right? An 8-second attention span, right? And it's damaging. It like, how could it not be, right? So you mentioned leadership, we as leaders, and recently, right now you're a department manager for MChigeeng Health, right? And awesome. That's great to see, a young guy like yourself in there. Prior to that, though, you took a run. You took a run for chief.
I did, yeah.
Now, explain a little bit about how you get to that spot where you're going to say, because I mean, you've been on council, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard. I mean, I've heard it before. Politics is not a young person's game, right? I mean, that's what old people say. And I kind of understand where that comes from, because when we're young and we're fresh out of school and we're full of piss and vinegar and we want to change the world and we want to do this, right? We have all of this newfound knowledge and we just want to apply it. Then we get, into the real world and we get kicked in the face and get kicked in the ass and get kicked everywhere, right? And as we're trying to develop the experience, right, to match that knowledge in order to give us that teaching of wisdom. So I get that, right? And maybe my emotional immaturity is causing me not to want to go into politics because I don't feel I'm old enough yet. Or what would make you want to do that?
I think for me, it's going back to like what I talked about before, right? Seeing the potential in the pain, right? Or seeing the potential through the pain.
The pain. I was almost going to say that.
Where you talk with the people and there's, oh man, like there's so much pain in their stories and what they're saying, right? And helping them understand that, not only that, but also find them a way to process that so that it doesn't become such a hindrance on your day-to-day life. It'll pop up and be like, hey, you know what? It's not a big deal anymore. I'm not there anymore. Giving them the tools to be able to do that.
Get through it.
Exactly. And understand it, right? Mm-hmm. And the more you understand it, the less of an impact it has on your day-to-day life, right? It's not debilitating in your day-to-day life anymore, right? It becomes something, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, Floyd told me to just take a look around the room and I'm not in that place anymore, right? It becomes that point. And I think we talked about this before actually, where you're going into a new situation where you're going to be triggered at that point, right? You start doing that work, right? Before you get even into that situation where you know that, you know what, this is going to bother me because I like to do things my way and I'm not going to know exactly what's going on. So you start doing the prep work before that situation even happens, right? In order to help you move through it, right? So the thing for me as to why I wanted to go into that was to shake things up a little bit, right? Where we need to start focusing on something different, right? We need to take a look at where we haven't been looking, right? Which is what we've been talking about this whole time, right? At our kids, right? In terms of, okay, you know what? Something's going on there. Let's actually help people understand that we've lost something. We've lost something along the way, right? And let's help us understand that as a community in order to get better. It's not about, Neil, like you're not doing this proper, right? Let me show you how. No, we've all lost this as a collective. And we need to understand this as a collective and move forward as a collective to become a community again, right? To become a place where, if you want to hear like a crazy wild dream that I have, is for Chigeeng to become actually like a healing centric, like a healing centric community, not just having its own treatment center, but having a whole community that's gone through their stuff, understands their cycle, has done something to resolve that. And now people come here to understand what that feels like, right? People come here to see, I want to come to you guys because you guys have done the work, right? I want to come to you guys and fish with you and like learn from you guys, because in a totally different way where we're at peace with our own minds now, right? We're not doing it to get a foot longer boat, right? We're not doing it to up the other guy next to us, right? We're doing it to support one another, to be there for one another. And at the end of the day, to understand that we're not alone in this, right? So I think for me, the big thing as to why I was running is I just wanted to make change in the parts where I haven't seen change in quite a long time, but we complain about it all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So I worked in mental health, and why aren't you doing anything about mental health? Different things like that. Like, what's our mental health program doing? What aren't we doing? But we're saying that like, as you guys need to help those people that have mental health issues.
Like a criticism.
Exactly. As opposed to, you know what, we've all gone through this. We all carry it in one way or another. Yes, I might cope with it. I might cope with my shit by working harder, right? By taking on extra jobs, right? By doing an extra podcast in the evening, right? Or whatever it might be. And someone else might do it based on a different learned behavior that they had in their house, right? Yeah. But that doesn't mean I'm any more than or less than that person, because at the end of the day, we're still trying to avoid facing that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But as long as we understand it in a better way, it doesn't have to be something that we get away from, right? It can be something that we hold, we understand, and we move forward from it, right? So I think that's where I came from in it. I think the big thing for me, what really changed it, was when I was working with students in the classroom, and I did some EFT kind of like circle discussions with them in like a traditional way, right? Like we did it in a circle, we did a smudge before, we talked to them about what's going to happen and what we're going to talk about, and I came in with a theme, right? And kids cried, right? Kids like did an amazing job at engaging with it, and how of emotionally available they were in that moment was so beautiful, right? And seeing the way that this classroom connected with each other after, and they like went out and played games together as a total group after, right? Was, yeah, it's mind blowing, right? And it's like doing like it, for me right now, I could feel that, right? Just that connection and that happiness that came from that, like, and then just to find out after that we weren't allowed to go back into the schools, right? Yeah. Because I don't know, someone complained or something happened, but it's just that fear that we have of emotion, right? That kind of that pulled us out of there, even though there was so much benefits to sitting with it. Yeah. Right? There's so many benefits to sitting with that emotion, understanding it, and then moving forward from it. Right? Like, and we saw that firsthand. And then on the other side of it, maybe someone didn't get the full picture of what was going on. They complained. Chief and council got involved, told us we can't go into schools anymore. Yeah, and that was disheartening, right?
Yeah,
to have that level of dissatisfaction, I guess, come from leadership with not getting a full understanding of what we were doing, I think was really heartbreaking.
Well, and I think, it brings up an interesting point. I mean, the vulnerability of what people don't understand that haven't been in a classroom, right? And understand how well everybody knows each other, right? The parents of those kids might not know each other at all, but all of those kids know each other very well, right? They know who's the best reader. They know who's the fastest runner. They know who can sing well. They know who has a good memory. They know who has a behavior issue. They know all of that. And so when people are criticizing something like that, right? They don't understand that the first job of a school or a classroom or a teacher is to create a safe space, right? Like this is the job, because we're going to be, in these rooms for 7 hours a day, right? For the next 200 days. And if we have to be able to share some of the shit that happens in families, right, in order to gain a better understanding of where so-and-so is coming from. Yeah. And we often did that, right from the very beginning, right, by getting out of the classroom, right, and getting out, and the first thing we did before any kid had an opportunity to screw up a trip, right, or the ability to go on a trip because of behavior, we took them on a trip. Right? We took them out for a canoe trip where they were disconnected because there was and still really isn't any signal out there, right? And they had to figure out and solve those problems and get into arguments and still be in the canoe, and someone had to steer it and everyone had to paddle and all of that shit, right? What that did for those kids, right, that had to go through that, they still talk about that. They still talk about those trips, and they did have differences and they did have disagreements and they didn't always get along, but at least they understood each other on a way better level in order to get through the year, right? Their last year. And it always set us up. It always set us up for a really enjoyable school year. Right. But again, we had criticisms and we had lots of pressure to not do that. Right. But, we pushed through it. But it was because of that lack of understanding by people on the outside, right, decision makers, of just what's exactly is entailed in running an effective classroom or running an effective school. Right. And kids are awesome that way. They share and they can be vulnerable. They're way more in touch with their emotions than we are. Right. God, yeah. When they're sad, they cry. Right. I mean, that's what happens. When they're happy, they do silly stuff. Right. And it's more reachable. Right. But if you go through years and years of that, you just keep burying that and burying it and burying it. And you as an adult, it becomes very hard to get at. Right. Liberating when you do, and freeing. Yeah. Right. But also thinking of a community like that in that regard. I can see why we stood behind you in your candidacy for chief. Right. I mean, we did know that about you. We did know that about you at the time. And it's just, luck would have it, right? The election, for whatever reason, got rescheduled for whatever reasons of politics, and this job came available that would allow you to really, when you think about it, be focused on that one pillar. Exactly. Right? Yeah. And not be focused, because when you're chief and when you have to be thinking of the pillar of health, the pillar of education, the pillar of social services, the pillar of housing, the pillar of infrastructure. And every single one of those pillars has to have a plan, right? And a goal and a plan and a way of executing that, and then redress to see, in a measure of accountability to see, is this working, right? All within what used to be a 2-year time frame, right?
Yeah.
Now it's 3 for us, but that election code through the Indian Act that's imposed on our governance system by the federal government is bullshit, right? Because it sets us up for failure every single time. Because you get in, you just figure out, if you're a new counselor or a new chief or whatever, right? And you get in there and you're just like, okay, what's going on? Holy macana, what's going on here, right? You just kind of get a handle on it, and then you're almost about to develop your plan or maybe start your plan, and then boom, election time, right? And that term is over.
Yeah.
Right. You have no time to execute it, which is bullshit, right? You can't have growth that way, right? In short order, unless you get elected for another term, or unless so many other things that happen. Whereas in a position like, like health director, those positions typically you do have, some longevity to them, and you can try and execute a vision when you lay out a strategic plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep going back to your analysis of the fear of the emotional self, and like channeling into those emotions, because like just hearing you talk about that, it's connecting dots for me in terms of like those responses to that fear, right? And typically, just as biological creatures, we have 3 fundamental responses to fear, and that's fight, flight, or freeze. And I can see like a lot of the people in our community, and not to single anybody out, but just the different symptoms that they have in expressing that fear to those emotional things that they're bearing. Like, for example, if you're fighting that fear, you're likely trying to channel some sort of alternative, like over productivity, or you're angry, or you're just having some sort of like fight against channeling that. And then the flight being maybe you're withdrawing, or you're seeking alcohol to distract you, that escapism. And then the freeze is of just living life kind of day to day, not having a plan, and getting stuck in a routine of inactivity, of not doing anything. That's also a response to that fear that I think a lot of my peers don't recognize as well. I'm not necessarily degressing, but I'm not progressing. I'm just kind of in this homeostasis of activity, and a lot of the time it's because they're not addressing that fear internally to be able to get through that.
Yeah, and the thing is, how do you expect someone to do that when they don't even know what the fear is originating from?
They don't know the root.
They don't know the root of it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I go in and I, like, it's all the time. Every time I go in and then talk to someone about an issue they're having, they talk to me about the issue that they're having today, right? It's never about today. Yeah. It's never as big as what it's about today. Yeah. But the big thing, right? The reason why they feel like it's a big thing has nothing to do with today. Yeah. Right? It has everything to do with why they believe they are the way they are, right? Mm-hmm. And that all comes back to those traumas and those pains. And when I say traumas, I don't mean like it has to be anything huge, right? Even like right now, like it's going to happen more and more now, actually, because we don't have to leave the house in order to not be there for our kids. Mm-hmm. Right? We can not be there for our kids and sit right next to them now, right? When we're talking about these devices, right? I know I'm guilty of that. Yeah. I know Junior comes up to me, he's like, Dad, put your phone down. Like, come play monster trucks with me, right? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Right?
Give your head a shake.
Exactly, right? But that can happen. Imagine if I didn't meet his needs in that moment, right? Yeah. And that's what trauma is, right? An emotional need is not met in a moment. Right?
Well, there's a lot of studies on that, like a reactive attachment disorder. When you look at that, when a 2-year-old does this to their parent, especially with moms for whatever reason, mostly because of that maternal connection, right? But they do this and the mom looks away. And that unresponsiveness, right? Or that dissing that the mom does wires the kid differently, right? Absolutely. And and we've seen that in schools, and we see, when that doesn't get addressed, how that develops into these, like, dude, it's hard to control. And those kids, you all know them because they're that kid in the class that you talk to your parents about, that so and so did this today, right? In the class. And lots of times, that is a result of that. And now you're right. It's right here. We're doing it. It's not just an addiction to opioids or alcoholism or a substance or a whatever, right? We've added another major factor into the mix, which is our distractions from technology, right? And being attached to that. And man, I don't know. I just don't know. It's hard because I love my phone, right? Like, I mean, it connects me to so many things that I need to do business wise.
Yeah, the utility of a phone is
it's just okay. What is an acceptable amount of time for me to put that damn thing down?
Yeah. And I think that's when we have to have an inventory, like do an inventory on what do my relationships look like right now, right? Are my kids happy with me? Yes. Yeah. My wife happy with me? Yes. Then you know what? I'm probably doing okay, right? It's not that we have to put it away by all means, right? But when we start seeing, like, my kids having certain behaviors, and I'm noticing that, like, we're not having that time together anymore, we need to engage with him a little bit more instead of this device.
Be
right?
aware.
Exactly. Just doing that. But you have to do your work in order to check in with yourself
and be honest to have that
realize that, right? Otherwise, you could go into shame or guilt and be like, "Oh my god, I'm doing it again." Like, another thing I'm not doing. Oh, let's go back on the phone. Right. Let's get that dopamine hit. Right.
The fear response.
Exactly. Like, we don't often realize how much we're impacted by that. Right. To what Jesse was saying, we don't even know what the fear is. Right.
Yeah.
But it's there. Right?
So how do you address that though? Like, to get to step one of, like, trying to get to the awareness piece, like, how do you get from I recognize I'm in a funk, but, like, I don't know what to do or what to, like, channel. I know it's hard to kind of answer that because there's so many different layers or conditions that could be affecting somebody. But just so, like, when you say awareness, what does that mean?
I think, well, when we but the way I look at it is this notion of truth, right? Like, this is I explain this lots of times to kids, to myself, right? Is that that no one can tell you, right, that you shouldn't be sad, or you know what I mean, that you're not happy, or that you're whatever, right? That piece of how you feel when you're feeling it, right, is your truth. What lots of people do is they're not honest with you about it, right? Why? Because they're afraid of that. They don't have the courage that it's going to take to share my truth and be honest. And when we look at it in terms of the teachings, right, it's important to just, okay, don't worry about anything else right now. Just tell me how you, like, what you're feeling. Well, I'm mad. Okay, all right, we're getting somewhere, right? And because they are, either it's buried or they're not being, or I'm sad. The biggest one is I'm sad, right?
Hurt, yeah.
Right, is I'm hurt because I don't want to tell people that they've hurt my feelings or whatever, for whatever reason, right? They don't want to hurt someone else. They don't want to show weakness or perceived weakness or whatever. But it's that notion of being okay with, this is how I'm feeling, right? And getting back to that, even if it's like, I just want to drink, right? Okay, I mean, yeah,
Yeah, the Leafs are out next week. Like, might as well, right? Win or lose, hit the booze.
But yeah, you know, that component of being of knowing your truth, right, and understanding it from in our case a cultural perspective of those belong to you. I mean, you can tell me, both of you guys can tell me that the sky is blue, and I will believe you. I don't know if it's true, okay, but I'll believe you because you both say it, right? That color that we're seeing is blue. But this, if you're telling me that I'm happy when I'm feeling this, I have to acknowledge that I'm not, right? That I know that I'm not, right? And I think we had this discussion on a podcast before about when kids come home and they're like, I'm dumb, right? This is the heartbreaker, right? I'm stupid. I hate school, right? And a parent immediately, right? Immediately, if your kid says, man, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, right? What do we say? No, you're not. Like, what? Who's telling you that you're dumb? You're not dumb. You're gonna and we say that, right? And we don't validate all of the courage that it takes for them to share that piece. Like, I feel like a dummy, right? And it's very hard as a parent to be, not be protective in that moment, right? And for us to say, you know what? I feel sad that you feel that way about yourself. But right for now, that's okay, right? It's okay that you feel that way because we're gonna change that together, right? And this is what we're gonna do. And then you hatch that plan, right? Immediately validating that kid. And I think that's the way I would look at that, of trying to, you know what, and the way you do that is by disconnecting. I mean, maybe that's why I love hunting and fishing so much, is because when I'm out there, I don't look at that like I do when I'm not, right? I'm in the moment. There's things there's wind blowing, there's scents, there's weather happening, there's animals reacting, right? And I think things are changing so much, you just get all of that, you get that dopamine fix in a different way by intaking, right, as much data as you can from the environment. And I think for me, that's how I see that, is that acknowledgement first of teaching kids, right, that it's okay to share that truth, and in a place that's very safe, whether it's the classroom, the home, right, or a circle of friends,
Preferably all of the above.
all of the above.
Right.
In the community, right, like what if I was okay to say that? I think that would be a start. And I guess, we're trying to do it from a health perspective. You're trying to do, I'm trying to do it from an education perspective. And it would be neat to see all of those plans converge, or having a strategic plan. Like you said, you should still run for chief.
Yeah. I think for me, with Jesse's question there, your question is, feed it back to me again, Jess.
How do you find that awareness, and how do you get to the root of that sensation of like, I know I'm in a funk, or I know that the regulation is off.
Yeah.
How do I address that?
Yeah. So I'd probably go one step deeper than what Neil was saying there is, yes, you have to acknowledge what you're feeling, but sometimes you also have to understand why you feel the way you feel, why we think the way we think, why we do the way we do, right? If so, my most basic understanding of life is that every single behavior is learned. Everything, right? We don't come out of the womb knowing how to smile, but every single person that picks up a baby, oh my God, such a cute baby, right? It's so cute. Right?
Well, not Jesse, but like most babies.
Well, yeah, most. Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't. But you know what I mean? And what's the first thing that babies learn? Yeah. Right? What do you see them do first?
Yeah,
right?
coochie coo smile.
Yeah, smile, right? Or if they're not listening to me, or I know I need to react, right? How do I get mommy and daddy's attention? Yeah. Oh, hey, that worked. Boom. Yeah, right? And the kids are so attuned to what they're feeling, right? And to what everybody else is feeling. That is their language at the beginning. Yeah. Over time, we lose that, right? And that's what we're talking about. But I think what we need to understand as people is, why do we feel the way we feel, right? I think that's where our awareness, our deeper awareness comes from, is why do I think the way I do, right? Why do I see the world the way I see the world, right? Why do I feel the way I do to this situation as opposed to the way Neil feels about it, right? Or, you know what I mean? I'm sure you run into this all the time on your podcast or your hunting channel. Why do I feel the way I feel about harvesting an animal and taking care of these animals in this way where it nourishes me? And on the flip side of it, why does a vegan say that
They hate it. Yeah.
they hate it, right?
Yeah.
Why do people think the way they think? That, I think, is the true awareness, right? And once you understand that, nothing really matters, right? You can take the stuff at face value, right? You can understand that, you know what, Neil does things the way he does it, right? And that's great, right? When we can come together and share a glass of water over a Leafs game or whatever it is, right, for the next 3 games. But you know what I mean? Those are things that we can learn together. But I think that true awareness is understanding why we do the way we do, right? And that comes down to everything.
And those experiences that caused us pain and suffering, right, that we didn't let go, or we didn't process and deconstruct and you know,
it's
whether
stuck
it's
as a muscle memory in your body.
it's just and either we run from it, right, or you know, we try and escape it somehow, whether it's through substance use or abuse or what have you, getting back to those traumatic roots, which is, you know, we've talked about this in terms of psilocybin treatment and that whole emerging field of naturopathic medicine. And it's not all, like, you know, it's psychotropics and psychedelics as well, right, that are manufactured. But that notion of like getting back to that, and it's fascinating to me to think about an out of body or an otherworldly or a you know, a psychedelic experience that actually pinpoints some of those traumatic roots to get you to go back to that point and process it, right, to set it free.
Exactly.
I mean, the shows on it, like the programming around it, is freaking awesome. I love watching that kind of thing, especially when you see. I watched one recently where it was a nun, right? She was in her, I don't know what it was, in her 70s, and she's like, man, I want the trip, right? And came out of it like, son of a bitch. Like, it was, you know what I mean? Like, never did mushrooms, right? Mm-hmm. She's not that person and went through the psychotherapy approach, right, to really get at, you know, and pinpoint something like that and undo that at the source. Exactly. Right? And I don't know if there's a way. That's hard to do. It's hard to get people to a point where they feel vulnerable enough to share that.
It's actually not that hard.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
No, it's not. It's the hardest thing I think people have is taking that first step of reaching out for help. Yeah. Right. Because there are a lot of people that have those skills to be able to walk someone through that without psychedelics and stuff like that. And that's part of the art of psychotherapy, right? When you're talking to someone, to be able to get to that same level as the psychedelics get to, by using your voice, right? By talking to Jesse, by talking to Neil, right? Using your own voice and what you have, your tools that you came with to help someone get through that, right? I was talking to an elder not too long ago, and they said, like, we used to do that work, right? We used to do that inner child work as First Nations people. Those are part of our ceremonies, right? And like, yeah, it just makes so much sense. Like, that inner child work is doing what you're doing to take care of that trauma in the moment and to set it free, right? So that's something that I do as well when I'm working with people, is to do that trauma work. And a lot of people, they take care of that little self inside of them in that moment, whatever moment that comes up for them when you get to those deeper feelings, right? So we get in there and they're seeing this little Floyd sitting at the table, right? I have to go in and take care of him, right, in that moment. What do I need to do that? And there's tons of different ways that people feel comfortable doing that. Some people are like, I'm going to bring my older self in. I'm going to bring my buddy Jesse in to come and give me a hand. I'm going to bring Neil in. Someone's going to call on the phone. I'm going to, like, I even had someone, like, I don't know how to do this without it being that unbelievable, right? She left herself a note on the table, and the kid found it and read it to herself. Right, that's how she took care of her little self in the moment. Right, there's so many beautiful ways of how we can work through that. Right, but I've been thinking of like a different way. Instead of just taking care of them in that moment, yes, take care of them in that moment, but also giving that little child the permission to go on and live their life, because we can handle the emotion now. Right, I wonder what that would do. Right, to help someone move through that. Right, hey, it's okay. You know what? You're good. I took care of you in this moment. You can also go on and live your life now. I can handle the emotions from here on out. I'm a big boy, right? Or big girl, right? So
that's like EFT plus.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's kind of like the next step. And I talked to someone I really look up to in EFT about this all the time, which is Gail Palmer. And I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am with myself internally or with EFT without her. She really pushed me along this path, and same with Tammy Gordon. Like
Tam's awesome.
They both pushed me down this path and said, you know what, go and do it. And like I said, I wasn't even finished my nursing yet, and Gail dragged me along that path. Said, I know you need to do this. I know what you need in order to continue with this modality, but you're doing it anyway. And I told her, I said, I can't. Right? She just kept pulling and said, no, I'm giving you you can join in. You don't even have to pay tuition. Come on up, right? Well, then I don't know. I have to take time off work and all this stuff. And no, you come stay at my place. You find a way to get up here, right? I couldn't say no to her, right? And I'm so thankful for her now. And I've told her that to her face, right? And I said, you know what, Gail, I would not be here without you. So I said thank you to her, like multiple times. I tell her that every time I see her.
That's awesome. Now, if someone wanted to like delve into EFT, that emotional focused therapy on their own and learn more about it, what would you recommend? Is there any books that jumps out, or is there some kind of, are there ways to do it and ways not to? What would you, I mean, it's interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more.
So for me, there's no wrong way to exploring what you've already gone through, right? What we do on every day, on a day-to-day basis, is to ignore that stuff. So for people that, like, I often hear people saying things like, oh, you're going to re-traumatize them, or you're going to re-traumatize yourself, or different things like that. You know what? It happened, right? Yeah. The only way I'm going to re-traumatize myself is not being there for myself in that moment again.
Not dealing with it. Yeah.
Which isn't going to happen, right? Yeah. If you told me something and I don't know, beat you up for it, then yes, maybe I might re-traumatize you. But if you told me something deep and I just sat there and listened, and I said, wow, Neil, that's wild. Can you tell me more? Yeah. You're being held in a different way, and your understanding of that in itself is going to be just held in a different way, because you're like, I don't know what to do with this. So I push it back. Do I bury it? What do I do? Whoa, he just said, tell me more. What? Right. Okay, let's do this.
There's validity to what I'm saying.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And we often never had that opportunity. But for people to go into this, and if they're looking for a way to get help themselves, it's up to them. There's tons of books out there. Gabor Mate is an amazing person to look into. Like, he talks about this stuff all the time. If you're looking for EFT specifically, there's ICEFT, ICEEFT .ca, I believe. They're out of Ottawa. Lots of training opportunities there. There's so much. There's books. There's if people are looking for how to engage with their partner in a different way, there's all kinds of stuff, right? So,
okay. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Gabor Mate. He's been here a number of times.
He's in Wiki soon too.
I love listening to his like the social media stuff that I see. Most of it is about 8 seconds, but I mean, no more. It's longer than that. But I mean, it just makes sense, right? Like it does make sense. The stuff on ADHD. He's been there and back, and it's just his calming sense. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that I'd like to I don't know, dabble in and learn a little bit more about that form of therapy, especially when we're talking about, you know, the park that we've developed, but that point in particular. I know we've shared that with you, and these the schematics of a treatment style of facility there at some point in the future, whether it be us or somebody else. It's a powerful connection to the land there when you can see you know, sunsets and sunrises from one spot, and you're surrounded by water. It's healing in itself. So if you then add, you know, another layer onto there, there's something to it. So I'm definitely going to be checking that out. I know we've been at it for a little bit more than an hour. One of the things that we do, you know, to wrap up our discussions, we talk a little bit about these rosebud thorns type of thing. And a rose is something that, you know, we're very happy about in the present moment. A bud is something we're looking forward to, and a thorn is something that's still, you know, an irritant that we're trying to work out, or, you know, a bug in our bonnet, if you will. Let's go with Jesse first in terms of your rosebud thorn.
Yeah, my rose is the nice weather, man. It's so nice to be outside again and get ready for hunting action coming down the line. Yeah, the weather's been a big mood booster for sure. A thorn that I've had is I'm doing renovations at home on the weekends, and it just seems like the more that I do, the more that piles up in terms of the next thing to do. So I think my prioritization of a little bit more home activity can be increased, and as a result, my bud is also that opportunity to do so. So the next couple of weekends are going to be dedicated to some of the priority areas in my life of cleaning my room, as Jordan Peterson would say, and getting some things in a row. Yeah, that's what I've got looking forward to me, is just, again, getting that nest a little bit cozy, and so I don't feel regretful in the summer when I know I'm going to be enjoying a lot of those weekends doing things outside of the home.
Right. So some home economics are in order, and you know, you got lots of time. You're not watching hockey. You don't really care what happens. So it's a good time to do it, right?
And in a week you'll have a helper to come and give you a help.
And yeah, so yeah, that's awesome. Good. And you should stay home, maybe not go to Vegas and not go to wherever. You've been everywhere, so you do need to stay home for a little bit. Good for you. What about you, Biggs?
I think a rose is probably going to be the ladies in my life, like my mom and my wife, who grant me the opportunities to do things like this in the evening, or do my consulting on the side and go away for a week at a time. I couldn't do it without them. As well as Gail and Tammy, like all those ladies in my lives that like kind of push me and support me to become better, right? I think that's huge, and I get that happy feeling inside just thinking about that, right? A bud is going to be a literal bud. We're expecting another little baby in September, so yeah, that's going to be awesome. Yeah, and a thorn is probably going to be just not having enough time in the day. I feel like I have so many things I want to do. I'm still prioritizing family for sure, but making sure I take time to reset a little bit, I think, has been my thorn recently. To take time for me, I think, has been that thorn, but still trying to handle everything I can, and me being a survivor of my own traumas, right? I want to do everything perfectly immediately, right? And when that doesn't happen, right, I put too much stress on myself. So I think that thorn is taking time for me to take some time for myself, get healthier for myself, and then everybody will benefit for that, I hope.
Yeah, 100%. It sounds like some early morning solo golf trips are in order for you coming up. Enjoy some of that outdoor weather. Awesome, and congratulations on the news of your little one. That's awesome. Good for you. For me, a rose. Oh geez, I'm heading down south, so and we're gonna be spending some time chasing turkeys with the family. Nice. I love doing that. It's a harvest season for us. getting out there. You know, we're out at 4 a.m. and we don't like it's hardcore. And I get to do that with the girls. Darcy's going to come down, Aspen, Diane. So that's always a ton of fun. And we're in that moment now. So the trailer, we're packing it. I'm getting ready to leave tomorrow. A thorn is just the busyness of the day. It's like you. I'm just trying to balance all of that time and take time for everybody that's important to me, and taking time for myself as well. That's the thorn, and the bud. Well, the bud is the buds, right? Because they're in the playoffs, and you know, like this is the time to be a Leafs fan because we're in the playoffs, right? Nylander, I don't think is playing again, so I've got my concerns with this whole coaching approach, but it's playoffs, man. So I'm looking forward to the next 3 games, hopefully more, but we'll see. We're gonna watch that game right now.
Let's go check it out.
All right, thanks, guys.
Now,